Revelation chapter 17, beginning in verse 1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the Spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." Amen? I think. I told you it was weird. I've titled today's message, "The Lamb Can't Lose." And you might be thinking, well, that's great. I really don't even know what's going on. So let me start with an illustration that will help make this passage a little bit easier to understand. In 1995, a man named Henry Orenstein invented something that took poker from one of the most boring things to watch and turned it into one of the most exciting things to watch. You see, he invented this thing called the whole card cam, which is a little camera that goes under the table that allows you to see all the cards, the hands that all the players have. It's like you're in on a secret. You can see everyone's hands, but they can't see what each other has. Now, every once in a while, poker goes from entertaining to awesome. Because every once in a while, there's someone who has an incredible hand, and they know it. They bet big, and they bully the other players into folding and things like that. But as incredible as their hand is, what you know is they have 0 chance of winning because someone else has a better hand. It's really fun to watch play out. It's interesting to see and to know the details of how something's going to end even when everybody else doesn't know it. But that's just poker. Don't you wish you had a whole card cam for life? For your life, for the world, for all the enemies that we face? Do you wish there was a little camera where you could see that even though they had an incredible hand, they had 0 chance of winning? And I'm not talking about the little things that annoy us. I'm talking about evil. I'm talking about cancer and genocide and death, the big stuff. I'm talking about tyrants and dictators and abusers. I'm talking about crushing debt and broken families and lifelong illness, that sort of stuff. Don't you wish you knew, even though those things looked undefeatable, they couldn't win? Well, what if I told you two things? First, what if I told you that our enemy is actually far worse than we think? That evil is far more seductive and destructive than we can imagine. But second, what if I also told you, as intimidating as it has zero chance of winning at the end of the day? What if I told you we can know who's going to win and not only know who's going to win, but how they're going to win? What if I told you that? What if I told you we can know not only who, but how they're going to win? Because we can. It's in our text this morning. That's exactly what's going on in Revelation chapter 17. Granted, it is one of the strangest chapters in Revelation, and if you've been here at all over the last several weeks, you know that's saying something. But I think in the midst of all of this craziness, one thing is clear. One thing is clear in the midst of this very strange chapter, and that is evil cannot win because the Lamb can't lose. It's as simple as that. That's what I want to convince you of this morning. The Lamb can't lose. That anyone in opposition to God eventually will lose. They're no match for the Lamb. That's what the text is doing this morning. On the one hand, it's showing us the reality of the power and the seductiveness of this world, while on the other hand, it's giving us an understanding of how much more powerful God is, so we can have confidence in Him. And so there's really only one question we should be asking ourselves as we move through our passage. Whether you've asked it before or whether you've just showed up here for the first time and you don't even really know why you're here. The question that we should be asking ourselves is, do I trust in this Lamb that can't lose? Do I trust in this Lamb that can't lose? Because everything important in our lives depends on our answer to that question. Let's be honest. Look at the beginning of Revelation chapter 17 again, where first we see a terrifying enemy. And the truth is, our enemy's a monster, and it's coming for every single one of us. The first few verses detail this woman and this beast, and it's frightening, and it's supposed to be. Now, remember where we are in Revelation. The first 16 chapters have been a lot like this one in many ways. Lots of wild imagery and cosmic battle of good and evil that has all these devastating effects on the earth. Things that if we went out there and actually said out loud, we'd probably get laughed at. But here's the thing. Even when we get to these really weird chapters, I think everyone kind of suspects all this to be true. They just don't say it like this, but in the heart of everyone out there, whether it be our culture or other cultures, you hear things like, oh, it's the Illuminati. Oh, it's this ruling class of 10 hyper-wealthy people. And then in all kinds of other religions, you have all these other things. It's this idea, everybody wants to think that there's someone somehow behind the scenes working things out. Everyone knows in their gut that there just seems to be something going on behind the scenes that we can't see. And all Revelation does is come along and says, yeah, that's actually what's happening. It's a terrifying enemy, but an even greater God. In case you're wondering, last week we saw God gave 7 bowls to pour out His wrath on earth, and the last 2 bowls were reserved for Babylon, and we saw in chapter 16 at the very end that Babylon breaks apart and burns to the ground. But in our passage, One of those angels comes walking over to John in verse 1 with one of those empty bowls and starts talking about the destruction of Babylon. Now, you don't have to be a literature major, right, to go like, wait a second. Chapter 16, Babylon gets destroyed. Chapter 17, the destruction of Babylon. Like, I thought that already happened, so why are we going over this again? Well, it's because John wants to give you and I some more details about it. Like how big Babylon actually is, and how the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Again, friends, to understand this passage, you have to ask yourself, how bad do you wish that everything that was wrong in this world would end? You have to ask yourself this question: where is your hope? Because where this passage is going to press us, it's going to press us into really, really questioning how much hope we put in Babylon and how much hope we put on the Lamb. How bad do you wish that everything that was wrong with the world would end? Because this text, it exists to tell us that Babylon, which is a symbol of everything that's wrong in the world, it's a symbolic city that represents all that's opposed to God. It's telling us it can't win because the Lamb can't lose. But before we start celebrating, John wants to make sure we understand how terrifying Babylon is, and so he gives us this picture of a prostitute. And he describes her as attractive and seducing all kinds of people. She's seated on many waters, which is weird language, but it's ripped right out of Jeremiah 51, which is interesting. Why would John use Jeremiah, which was written hundreds of years before, why would he use Jeremiah to describe something that's going to happen in the future? Well, simply put, it's because in Jeremiah 51, God's talking about the destruction of the physical Babylon in Jeremiah's day. And he describes that physical city that actually existed, that exiled Judah. He's describing that city as sitting on many waters. But John's readers would have understood something about Jeremiah 51. They would have known that when Jeremiah wrote Jeremiah 51 about Babylon being destroyed, it was crazy talk. It did not look at all like Babylon could fall. When Jeremiah wrote Jeremiah 51, Babylon looked invincible. They crushed everyone they wanted to, including Israel, who was in Babylon, because Babylon had just crushed them when Jeremiah wrote Jeremiah 51. But John's original readers would have also known that shortly after he wrote Jeremiah 51, what everyone thought was impossible happened. Babylon, in fact, did go down hard. And so John's making this connection here. He's talking about this much bigger and more powerful Babylon, and he goes, hey, by the way, the Babylon I'm talking about, it's going to go down too. You just got to look back in history. You know that other Babylon that didn't look like it was going to go down? Well, this one's going to go down just like that one. If you fear that our world, that this Babylon that we live in is too big, just look back at that one and go, if that, then this too. Because that one also seemed too powerful to be defeated. Friends, I don't know where you are this morning, but this is good news. Babylon always loses. The evil in this world always loses. It never stands a chance. But before we get too far ahead, let's not start clapping, because Babylon does go down swinging. Verse 2 gives us a rather graphic display, a rather graphic description of idolatry. Now, throughout the Bible, Babylon symbolizes, remember, worldly power, economic power, all those things that the people of the earth put their trust and hope in. And the powerful and the wealthy people of the earth, Revelation 17 says, parents, I'm not making this up, I'm just reading it straight out of the Bible. It says humanity is pictured as having sex with this symbolic ideal of that system. Now, you might be thinking, that's gross. That makes me uncomfortable. Good. That's the purpose. it's supposed to make us uncomfortable because that's what idolatry is. It's gross. Listen, before we prudishly turn our noses up at uncomfortable passages like this, the point that it and others like it is making is this. When we, you and I, start looking to the things of this world for satisfaction and provision, when we start looking to success and wealth and influence for happiness and safety and fulfillment, when we do those things, spiritually speaking, the blunt truth is we're cheating on God and having spiritual sex with this prostitute, Babylon. But don't worry, it gets weirder. Look at how she's dressed in verses 3 through 5. It says, scarlet beast, there's these blasphemous names, there's 7 heads, 10 horns. Verse 4 says she's arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with jewels and pearls, and you're like, I don't know what any of this means. What's up with all that? The bottom line is, she doesn't look like a prostitute. In fact, she looks pretty good. She looks like royalty. She looks like she knows what she's doing. She looks successful. She looks important. In fact, she looks like someone maybe I should listen to. Like if John wrote in our day, he might describe her something like this, as being robed in an American flag. She has like 10 billion followers on Insta. Her kids listen to her, and she's fit. She looks like wealth and health and prosperity and success. But whether then or now, John wants to make sure we understand things like the gospel of the American dream are nothing but a prostitute. Look again at verse 6, where all of this turns out. This woman, John says, I saw her drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. The truth is, Babylon wants every single one of us to adore her. It doesn't matter who you are or what you believe or where you came from, Babylon wants to seduce you. And she requires nothing less than the devotion of a lover. So friends, do you love Babylon this morning? Because to be clear, she won't love you back. But if we can be honest, she's pretty seductive. And don't get me wrong, I'm not just talking about those weak Christians out there that are in love with the world unlike us. Because lest we think we're better than the Apostle John, just look at what he says in the second half of verse 6. This is in the Bible. John says, when I saw her, I marveled greatly. Translation, wow, she's pretty. Do not think that you cannot be seduced by Babylon. Brothers and sisters, the simple truth is, when it comes to this prostitute, we're like Homer Simpson looking at a box of donuts. Tasty. Right? We have to heed this warning that we, just because we're sitting in this room, are not outside the reach of Babylon. She is beautiful, she is powerful, and she is seductive. And the stakes are far higher than a few unwanted calories. So, is there any way to escape this devouring seductiveness, this prostitute of Babylon? That's a good question. It's the question that the text wants us to ask. Because it's the question that the rest of the text tells us how to do as we move from this terrifying enemy to the triumphant explanation. The triumphant explanation. Remember, John's not the only one on the scene. Remember, the whole thing kicked off because one of those angels with an empty bowl came over to him to tell him to look at this beast. But now look in verse 7, that angel sees John marveling at the woman, and he goes, whoa, 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 whoa. You knocked that off. He said, what are you doing? He says, why do you marvel at this woman? I'll tell you the mystery of this woman. Now, here's the thing you got to understand about the word mystery in the Bible. It's not like your British mystery, murder thing. It's not like your mystery books. It's not like that. The word mystery in the Bible is, it was unknown, but now I'm going to tell you what it means. It's really simple. That's what it is. Mystery in the Bible is something that was unknown and now is being revealed. And so this angel's like, okay, listen, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this prostitute that's trying to seduce you. And if you remember what you just read, you're kind of like, well, that would be super helpful, but everything this angel says is not. It doesn't help out at all. It's all just completely weird. And it is. This angel begins to reveal this mystery by saying the beast, he says in verse 8, is particularly strange because it was and is not and is about to rise. And as we've seen over and over and over again in Revelation, this beast is trying to mimic Jesus in his life and death and resurrection. Over and over again in Revelation, we've heard about Jesus who was and is to come. And now this beast is trying to act kind of like Jesus. But notice there, in verse 8, this beast is about to rise and then go to destruction. In other words, wrong can't win because the Lamb can't lose. I mean, this is like the greatest anticlimactic chapter in Revelation. It would make for a crazy movie. The problem is it's all just build-up, and then it just resolves in a second. It would be a poorly reviewed book because there's hardly anything to it. It's like, yeah, here comes the battle. Oh, never mind. It's over. I thought there was going to be a cool fight or something, but it just ends. But regardless, it says this beast draws worship from people. In verse 8, it says the world is worshiping this beast because of its seemingly inability to die. And isn't that part of what makes the world so seductive? On the one hand, we look out and we see all these people who seem to be doing pretty good with their worldliness. It hasn't worked for me yet, but maybe I'll give it another shot because it seems to be working for everyone else. And not only that, it just seems like that's how it always is. We're right back in Ecclesiastes. Seems like the party's never going to end for some people, while it seems like Christians can't even get the party started. It's so tempting to buy into the lie and to just live for myself today and to give myself to Babylon and to hope in these things that I see everyone else being successful with. And that's just the beginning of the craziness here. In verse 9, the whole thing really dives off into crazy land. 7 heads who are 7 mountains who are 7 kings. Well, I don't know, what is that? Then there's the fun math problem in verse 10 and 11. It's 5 plus 1 plus 1, and the beast is the 8th, but it belongs to the 7th, and you're like, okay. You didn't tell me I'm going to have to do word problems. I want to go back to Psalms. What are we supposed to do with all this? Well, to begin with, if you feel confused, you're welcome. That's what the text is supposed to do. It's supposed to be overwhelming. It's supposed to be confusing, but we can get a basic handle on what's going on here. Mountains throughout the Bible they're places of authority. And it's not just that way for Judaism and Christianity. It's that way all over the world. In ancient times, everyone had this kind of idea that mountains were special because they were tall, closer to the gods. It goes back to Babylon. They were trying to build their own mountain so that they could be near God. In other words, these worldly powers that are contending against God and his people are strong. They're these divine-like ruler kings that are opposed to God and his people, and it's all supposed to be very scary. It sounds confusing and terrifying, and that's the point. And it's hard for us to understand here sometimes what's being described because we live in a relatively stable society. But you go to some place like the Congo or North Vietnam, and all of a sudden, this becomes very real. And you understand these divine ruler kings who are opposed and strong. But again, don't miss the main point. It comes around a second time in case we missed it the first time. It says in verse 11, as for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And you're like, come on. I thought we were going to have a fight. Like, I thought this was going to be exciting. Nope. Evil can't win, brothers and sisters, because the Lamb can't lose. And you might wonder about some of the details, like what about those 10 horns? That sounds pretty important. Especially if you remember back to Revelation chapter 5, Jesus was described as having only 7 horns. And again, you're like, I'm not real good at math, but 10 sounds like more than 7. Is that a problem? The Lamb with 7 horns, and horns being symbols of authority, right? The Lamb's got 7. Seems like he has all the authority of the world, but now the beast has 10. It looks like the beast has more authority than Jesus. And that's the point. You ever feel that way? Like the world's got more power? The world's got more influence? Like the world's going to win? You should. It should look like the world is powerful. It should feel like the world is winning, just until it doesn't. As Kim read us this morning, Jesus told us we will go into tribulation. Paul very clearly told Timothy, all who desire to live a godly life will face persecution. Jesus told us, your servant's not greater than the master. If they hate me, they're going to hate you. It should look like that. In fact, we should be real suspicious when it looks like the church is winning according to earth's standards. We should be real suspicious when it looks like the church is winning according to the earth's standards. Because it's not supposed to look that way. We should just know that evil is going to lose. It's just the winning that we're looking for isn't here and now, but there and then. That's the victory that's inevitable because wrong can't win, because the Lamb can't lose. I mean, just look at it. 10 horns, all this authority. There's a bunch that worship the beast. It sounds like this impossible enemy. It's all building up until yet again, verse 14, and the Lamb will conquer them. And again, it's like, dang, I wanted this big sword fight, where Jesus almost loses and then he remembers who he is and he comes back and he beats, Nope. Sorry. They all get ready for the fight and the Lamb just shows up and whoops everyone. It's over. I mean, just look at his titles. The Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. The Lamb can't lose, folks. Are you following this Lamb? Are you following the Lamb that can't lose? Because he's got all power and all authority, and when he's ready to end this, no enemy stands a chance. If you don't follow him, if you think this Lamb will lose, if you feel like this world and everything it offers is better, let me be clear, you're going to lose everything. Forever. You can't get it back. There are no second chances. There are no changing your mind. You lose everything if you don't get behind this Lamb. And maybe you have already, and maybe you're asking, like, what does that look like? What does it look like to follow this Lamb? Well, I think maybe just to put it really simply, if you want a mantra for your life, the first saints had a really, really good idea of what this looks like. Acts 4 details for us how they devoted themselves to the reading of Scripture, meaning they read the Lamb's Word, and they devoted themselves to prayer, meaning they talked to the Lamb, and they devoted themselves to each other. They hung out with other people following the Lamb, and they devoted themselves to the breaking of the bread, meaning they took the time to remember the Lamb. In other words, know this beast and this prostitute are seductive, so devote yourself to the truth and hang out with other people who want the truth too. and together follow this Lamb wherever he goes. Encourage each other wherever he goes, even when it doesn't seem to make sense, even when it looks like we're losing. Because if you do that, look at what it says about us in verse 14. It says, those people are chosen and faithful. And let me be real clear, that is both an encouragement and an exhortation. Yeah, you're chosen. Encouragement. God chose you. Not because of your own merit, but you still are chosen and you can't be unchosen. Encouragement. But don't forget, you're also faithful. You're also called to be faithful. The battle's not going to stop until we're dead or Jesus comes back, whichever comes first. So, brothers and sisters, we walk through this battle behind the Lamb who can't lose because he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. All we need to do is keep walking behind him, keep following him. And if that weren't encouraging enough, just lastly, look at the encouragement of how Babylon goes down in the last few verses of this passage. And I'm going to read it again because I want you to pay attention to how this whole thing collapses. Look at verse 15 one more time. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are many peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. So just to be sure, it says this prostitute is in charge of a lot of people. It's seated on waters, but let me tell you what those waters are. Those are millions of people. And the 10 horns, verse 16, that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. Okay, that's different. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Now, if you're thinking, hold on, according to this passage, it's the Lamb who takes out Babylon, but also according to this passage, it's the enemy that consumes itself. Yep, you read it right. It's exactly what's going to happen. You want to know how inevitable it is that this enemy loses? You want to know how inevitable it is of the Lamb's victory? Wrong fights against itself in the end and destroys itself. It's saying basically while the Lamb is destroying it, it falls into such chaos that it joins in with the Lamb and helps destroy itself. Why? Because verse 17, God tells it to. In other words, saints, even the devil is God's devil. Even this prostitute is God's prostitute. Even the beast is at the whim of God. He tells the beast to consume the prostitute. Yes, sir, he goes and eats it. It's like it's so inevitable that the Lamb is going to win, it's a joke. As soon as God's done, he's just going to tell everybody to turn on themselves and destroy themselves. It doesn't look like it right now. The beast is terrifying all the way to the end. But friends, take heart. Our hope is that we have seen the pocket cam of history. Wrong can't win. Babylon does have an incredible hand, but it has exactly zero chance of winning because the Lamb can't lose. And so all we're left with to do today is to follow the Lamb and to ask, how long, O Lord? How long until you end this? Until you conquer every evil thing, every sorrow, pain, and wrong. They will cease with your return, O King. How long, O Lord? How long? Let's make